My adult daughters took me out for lunch on Father's Day, and they took me to some place other than Popeyes, even though they knew that was where I really wanted to go. It was a little classier, and so as you might suspect, I hadn't been there before. After studying the menu with great thoughtfulness and seriousness, I placed my order and waited for it to be prepared. When the food was brought to the table, it was not what I had ordered. And I mentioned to the waiter what I had ordered. The waiter apologized profusely and said that they would get it right out to me and offered to give me a salad on the house. I gladly consented to having a salad on the house. And when the waiter had gone to get it, one of my daughters said, "You know, Dad, what they brought you looked pretty good." The other daughter quickly agreed with her sister, and I couldn't disagree. My salad on the house was delicious, as well as the rest of my lunch, but I'm confident that I would have also enjoyed what they had brought me by mistake. The waiter continued to try to make up for his mistake by offering us free dessert after we had finished our entrees. Before I could say sure, my daughter replied, "No thanks." I knew better than to protest, and I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to lecture on Father's Day about being ungracious and taking advantage of a simple situation for a simple mistake. So I just nodded my head when my daughter said, "No thanks." While Father's Day is an opportunity for children to express appreciation, I was about to make it into Pig's Day by taking advantage of that simple mistake that did not merit all that special treatment. I suspect that Pig's Day gets celebrated many times a day, every day in our culture. And it's likely that the pigs would object to calling it that. We are people of entitlement, even though we've done nothing to merit it. David Brooks describes our culture of entitlement in his books. In The Road to Character, Brooks describes our culture as the big me. He cites Gallup data, which in 1950 asked high school seniors if they considered themselves to be a very important person. At that point, 12% said yes. The same question was asked in 2003, and it was 80%. Brooks discusses the similarities between commercial society and Woodstock by observing the bourgeois culture of commerce could merge with the bohemian culture of the 1960s precisely because both favored individual liberation. Both encouraged people to measure their lives by how they were able to achieve self-gratification. He goes on later to recount how public language has also become demoralized. Google Ngrams measure word usages across media. Google scans the contents of books and publications going back for decades. You can type in a word and see over the years which words have been used more frequently and which less frequently. Over the past few decades, there's been a sharp rise in the use of individualist words and phrases like self and personalized. I come first. I can do it myself. And a sharp decline in community words like community, share, united, and common good. The use of words having to do with economics and business has increased, while the language of morality and character building is in decline. Usage of words like character, conscience, and virtue all declined over the course of the 20th century. Usage of the word bravery has declined by 66% over the course of the 20th century. Gratitude is down 49%. Humbleness is down 52%. And kindness is down 56%. In the second mountain, Brooks shares that researchers at the Harvard Graduate School of Education recently asked 10,000 middle and high school students if their parents cared more about personal achievements or whether they were kind. 80% said that the parents cared more about achievements, individual success, over relational bonds. The dynamics described by David Brooks in his books are complemented by the works of Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt in their book called The Coddling of the American Mind: How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure. As it pertains to our focus this morning, they describe the current atmosphere on college campuses as a consequence of a market-driven culture in which students are treated as consumers. They relate from 2003 to 2013, public research universities increased spending on student services by 22.3%, which was far more than the increase for research, 9.5%, or instruction, 9.4%. They go on to observe many campuses have become less like scholarly monasteries and more like luxurious country clubs. This trend is exemplified by Louisiana State University's 536-foot-long lazy river paid for with $85 million in student fees. The slow-moving current gently pushes floating students through a winding pool in the shape of the school's initials, LSU. Now, when I went to college, I thought it was a big deal that my parents elected to get me laundry service that would provide me clean towels and sheets every week. The dining hall usually gave us two choices. And most campuses today have food courts, which students can eat as much as they like. And believe it or not, many students complain and go off campus to eat. Our scripture reading and our theological understandings challenge the kind of culture that we've created for ourselves by showing us a very different way that God operates. The mothers of the sons of Zebedee are like many mothers, looking out for her sons and trying to gain them the best spot, maybe the first helicopter parent. One aspect of this reading today, which jumped out at me for the first time, is that after she makes the request, the text says, Jesus said to them, that is, not only to her, but to her sons. So it got me to thinking about how the sons were colluding with their mother in this request. I used to get my mother to ask for things that I wanted, but was too embarrassed to ask for myself. I just don't want the mother to take the full rap this morning, because it's just another facet of our deceitful ways of behaving. Anyway, Jesus is not interested in playing that game. And like the boys used their mother, he uses the father to alleviate, giving them a more blistering response. Nonetheless, everyone gets indignant, and Jesus had to call everyone down from their high horses. That was what folks in the mountains used to say when someone was thinking more of themselves or more about themselves than they ought. I'm thinking it had to be a bit annoying when the Christ, who had taken on human form, had to try to help those around him understand selflessness. Jesus is a lot more patient than I would have been. He talks about the culture of his day, in which people like exercising authority over others, doing and getting what they want, and how it's to be different among them. He says that whoever wants to become great must be a servant. And whoever wants to be first must be gets worse, slave. Talk about being out of step with this culture. Not only the culture of that day, but also the culture of our day. But then maybe it's about more than culture. Maybe it's human nature. I was reading Bishop Willimon this past week. I know you've missed him in my preaching lately. Don't worry, I still love him. He posed the question, what is the decisive mark of God? And then he answers, self-giving. As we contemplate the meaning of our scripture reading today, I thought it might be helpful to pose the question of what is the difference between a citizen and a consumer. To help you answer that question, let me ask, which one gives and which one takes? I've been reading Jill Lepore's history of the United States entitled These Truths. It's 800 pages of text, so you may not want to rush out and buy it. Let me give you a couple of the highlights. She writes on page 406, during the 1920s, Americans' faith in progress turned into a faith in prosperity, fueled by consumption. A change has come over our democracy, a journalist reported. It's called consumptionism. The American citizen's first importance to his country is no longer that of a citizen, but that of a consumer. Then on page 451, she tells about the beginnings of political consulting and relates that Clem Whitaker and Leona Baxter started the first agency called Campaigns Incorporated in the early 1930s. Lepore writes, no single industry altered the workings of American democracy so wholly as the industry Whitaker and Baxter founded. Every voter, a consumer, every consumer, a voter was their mantra. Now, just to be clear, this sermon is not just about our citizenship in this nation, but about our citizenship in God's kingdom, which does have implications for our citizenship in this nation. In his most recent book, David Brooks shares, Cynthia Bogot writes that the kingdom of heaven is not a place you go to. It's a place you come from. It's a transformed way of looking at the world, which comes about as you move more deeply into God, and God moves more deeply into you. God invites us to make that move now as we celebrate the sacrament of Holy Communion. It's just a bit of bread and a sip of juice. Not very impressive at all. Until you recognize the life it recalls and the life to which it calls us.